A Quiet Place Day One is the third movie in the Quiet Place franchise, and it serves as a prequel to the first two movies. And it's the first movie in the franchise to not be directed by John Krasinski, though he does have a story by credit. This was one of the horror movies of the entire year that I was looking forward to the most, and I just got out of the earliest possible showing that I could see in my state, and I have a lot of thoughts that I want to share with you. So I'm going to jump into the review. It will be a spoiler-free review, but before I do that, consider subscribing. I talk about movies all the time on this channel, especially horror movies. I absolutely love horror movies, but I also talk about TV shows and video games. A Quiet Place Day One stars Lupita Nyong'o as a character named Sam, and when the movie begins, she takes a day trip with a small group of characters into New York City, and when she's there, aliens come down, and of course, all hell breaks loose. I don't want to spoil Sam's character arc for you. I don't want to tell you the situation that she's in when the movie begins. But because of where she is in life, it puts her in this very unique headspace. A headspace that's entirely different from any character in the Quiet Place franchise so far. And because of the headspace that she's in, her motivation and her goal throughout this movie is a lot different than what you'd expect it to be. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything here, but her motivation in this movie isn't necessarily to escape the city. It's a lot different than that. And I think that this movie took a big gamble when they were deciding where her head would be, what her motivations would be, because it very easily could have come across very unbelievable or just outright stupid and dumb, easy to not support or sympathize with. But because of the phenomenal writing and the amazing performance that accompanies the writing, I think it actually paid off. And it made the heart and soul of this movie feel very distinct and unique, where it instead could have felt very generic. It could have just been characters in New York City when a catastrophe hits and then they're trying to escape the end, but they don't go that route. But more importantly, the mission that she's on feels the most impactful because of the company that she finds along her journey. The second main character, named Eric, played by Joseph Quinn, is also really, really good, and his performance is phenomenal as well. He shows a surprising amount of emotional vulnerability, and his dynamic with Sam is, no questions asked, the main thing that I took away from this movie. They are two very strong pillars, and because of them, they lift everything else up with them when it comes to this film. Yes, the direction is good, and yes, the horror is good, but when it comes to the characters in this movie, it's definitely what was showcased here, a lot more than everything else. And not just with them two, but also with Alex Wolff. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't think Alex Wolff was in a lot of the marketing for this movie, but his character and his performance was really good as well. He's in a lot more of this movie than I was expecting him to be, and he makes quite an impact. Now let's talk about the horror with A Quiet Place Day One. It's good. It's really good, in fact. There were a couple scenes that actually got my heart pumping a bit. It was pretty effective in a lot of spots. But if you've seen A Quiet Place 1, or if you've seen A Quiet Place 2, they don't really do anything new here. Every scene of horror feels like a redone version of a scene that we've already seen in one of the first two movies. Most of the horror is either like a character standing there trying really hard to be quiet while one of the aliens is like sniffing around them, or the characters just walking around and they don't focus as hard as they should, and then they accidentally knock something over, and then an alien runs at them, and then a chase scene ensues. And don't get me wrong, it was good in the first movie, it was good in the second movie, and it's still good here. In fact, it's better here than I feel like it should be, being 3 films deep into a franchise. But again, I just wish they found a couple ways to try something different. I know there's only so much that you can do with aliens who only attack when they hear stuff. You don't want to make anything unbelievable for this universe, and obviously you don't want to break canon, but still, I wish there were a couple sequences in this movie that felt unique, and unfortunately, I don't think there was any unique horror elements in this movie. And again, there were some great moments of adrenaline pumping, anxiety inducing horror in this movie, moments that I'll remember for sure, and it did get my heart pumping a little bit, but there was no sequence or scene in this movie as impactful as, say, like the last 20 minutes of A Quiet Place Part 1, or even like the dock sequence in A Quiet Place Part 2, or the sequence in the radio station on the island in A Quiet Place Part 2. Nothing in this movie ever reaches those heights, and that was disappointing to me. But one way that this movie does manage to make things feel fresh, including the scares, is with the setting. New York City was a really cool and good option for them to make this movie take place in. It very easily could could have been generic. It very easily could have been, you know, chosen to be New York City for the gimmick alone, where 30 minutes into the movie and you forget they're in New York City. They might as well have been anywhere, but that's not the case here. From the beginning of A Quiet Place Day 1 all the way to the ending, New York City plays such a huge role. It at times feels like the third main character. Just the simple fact that they are in New York City is showcased so much in the direction, the way that the horror plays out, the way the characters move around, the way they act, and even their own personal character arcs. But don't get me wrong, even though it may have sounded like I was harsh on the horror aspects of A Quiet Place Day 1, I still really liked this movie. In fact, it might be my favorite horror movie of the year so far, and I definitely don't think that we should take the Quiet Place franchise for granted, because think about it. We got A Quiet Place. We got A Quiet Place Part 2, and now we got A Quiet Place Day 1. We are 3 films deep into a theatrically released horror franchise, and so far, all 3 of them are very strong and very good and help elevate each other. How often does that happen these days with horror movies? Most really good horror movies these days are either one-offs done by like A24 or some surprisingly good one-offs by like, you know, Blumhouse or something like that. But how often in this day and age do we get a horror franchise that is now 3 movies deep that is still as good as A Quiet Place is? But anyway, that's my quick and brief thoughts after seeing A Quiet Place Day 1. What did you think about it? If you've seen it, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen it yet, let me know. Do you plan on watching it, or are you going to skip it completely? Either way, I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Once again, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.